Tajikistan.
Tajikistan, officially the Republic of Tajikistan, is a mountainous landlocked country in Central Asia. It borders Afghanistan to the south, Uzbekistan to the west, Kyrgyzstan to the north, and China to the east. Chitral and Gilgit-Baltistan are separated from Tajikistan by the narrow Wakhan Corridor in the south. Most of Tajikistan's population belongs to the Persian-speaking Tajik ethnic group, who share language with Afghanistan and Iran. Once part of the Samanid Empire, Tajikistan became a constituent republic of the Soviet Union in the 20th century, known as the Tajik Soviet Socialist Republic, Tajik SSR. Mountains cover more than 90% of the republic. After independence, Tajikistan suffered from a devastating civil war which lasted from 1992 to 1997. Since the end of the war, newly established political stability and foreign aid have allowed the country's economy to grow. Trade in commodities such as cotton, aluminium and uranium has contributed greatly to this steady improvement.
Etymology.
Tajikistan means the land of the Tajiks. The word Tajik was used by medieval Turks to refer to Iranian-speaking peoples. From the 11th century, the term referred to East Iranian people, but by the 15th century came to be applied to Persian speakers. In medieval Persian literature, Tajik appears as a synonym of Persian. As a self-designation, the term Tajik, Tokarik, has become acceptable only during the last decades of the 20th century, particularly as a result of Soviet administration in Central Asia. The term does not denote an ethnic group in the narrow sense, but remains a general designation of a variety of Persian-speaking peoples in Central Asia. Tajikistan was frequently spelled as Tajikistan or Tadzhikistan in English, transliterated from the Russian. In Russian the phoneme /dz/ in Tadzhikistan is spelled dzh, that is, dzh or dj. Tadzhikistan is the most common alternate spelling and is widely used in English literature derived from Russian sources. Tajikistan is the spelling in French and can occasionally be found in English-language texts.
History. Prehistory.
The territory of what is now Tajikistan has been inhabited continuously since 4000 BC. It has been under the rule of various empires throughout history, for the longest period being part of the Persian Empire. It was originally called Nep for a short period of time, before being given the name Tajikistan. Further, Sir George Abraham Grierson says that the speech of Badakhshan was Alko until about 3 centuries ago when it was supplanted by a form of Persian. Thus, the ancient Cambodia probably included the Badakhshan, the Pamirs and northern territories including the Yanobai region in the Doab of the Oxus and Jaxartes. On the east it was bounded roughly by Yarkand and or Kashgar, on the west by Balika, Uttara Madra, on the northwest by Sugdiana, on the north by Uttarakuru, on the southeast by Darada, and on the south by Gandhara. Numerous Indologists locate the original Cambodia in the Pamirs and Badakhshan and the Parama Cambodia further north, in the Trans-Pamirian territories comprising the Zarafshan Valley, north up parts of Sogdiana or Fergana, in the Sakhadvipa or Scythia of the classical writers. Thus, in pre-Buddhist times, 7th–6th century BCE, the parts of modern Tajikistan including territories as far as the Zarafshan Valley and Sogdiana formed parts of ancient Cambodia and the Parama Cambodia kingdoms when it was ruled by the Kambojas till it became part of Persian Achaemenid Empire. After the Persian Empire was defeated by Alexander the Great, the region became the northern part of Hellenistic Greco-Bactrian kingdom. From the last quarter of 4th century BCE until the first quarter of the 2nd century BCE, it was part of the Bactrian Empire, from whom it was passed on to Scythian Tikharas and hence became part of Tikharistan. Contact with the Chinese Han dynasty was made in the 2nd century BCE, when envoys were sent to the area of Bactria to explore regions west of China. Arabs brought Islam in the 7th century CE. The Samanid Empire supplanted the Arabs and enlarged the cities of Samarkand and Bukhara, which became the cultural centers of Tajiks, both of which are now in Uzbekistan. The Mongols would later take partial control of Central Asia, and later the land that today comprises Tajikistan became a part of the Emirate of Bukhara. A small community of Jews, displaced from the Middle East after the Babylonian captivity, migrated to the region and settled there after 600 BCE, though the majority of the recent Jewish population did not migrate to Tajikistan until the 20th century.
Russian Tajikistan.
In the 19th century, the Russian Empire began to spread into Central Asia during the Great Game. Between 1864 and 1885 it gradually took control of the entire territory of Russian Turkestan from today's border with Kazakhstan in the north to the Caspian Sea in the west and the border with Afghanistan in the south. Tajikistan was eventually carved out of this territory, which historically had a large Tajik population. After the overthrow of Imperial Russia in 1917, guerrillas throughout Central Asia, known as Basmaki, waged a war against Bolshevik armies in a futile attempt to maintain independence. The Bolsheviks prevailed after a 4-year war, in which mosques and villages were burned down and the population heavily suppressed. Soviet authorities started a campaign of secularization, practicing Muslims, Jews, and Christians were persecuted, and mosques, churches, and synagogues were closed.
Soviet Tajikistan.
In 1924, the Tajik Autonomous Soviet Socialist Republic was created as a part of Uzbekistan, but in 1929 the Tajik Soviet Socialist Republic, Tajik SSR, was made a separate constituent republic, see also Shirin-Shoshotima. The predominantly ethnic Tajik cities of Samarkand and Bukhara remained in the Uzbek SSR. Between 1926 and 1959 the proportion of Russians among Tajikistan's population grew from less than 1% to 13%. Some 120,000 inhabitants of Tajikistan died during World War II. In terms of living conditions, education and industry Tajikistan was behind the other Soviet republics. In the 1980s, it had the lowest household saving rate in the USSR, the lowest percentage of households in the two top per capita income groups, and the lowest rate of university graduates per 1,000 people. By the late 1980s Tajik nationalists were calling for increased rights. Real disturbances did not occur within the republic until 1990. The following year, the Soviet Union collapsed, and Tajikistan declared its independence. The first nation to establish an embassy in Dushanbe was Iran, which was also one of the first countries to immediately recognize Tajikistan as an independent state in 1991.
Independence.
The nation almost immediately fell into a civil war that involved various factions fighting one another. These factions were often distinguished by clan loyalties. Non-Muslims, especially Russians and Jews, fled during this time because of persecution, increased poverty and better economic opportunities in the West or in other former Soviet republics. Emomali Rahman came to power in 1994, defeating former Prime Minister Abdulmalik Abdullajanov in a November presidential election with 58% of the vote. The elections took place shortly after the end of the war, and Tajikistan was in a state of complete devastation. The estimated dead numbered over 100,000. Around 1.2 million people were refugees inside and outside of the country. In 1997, a ceasefire was reached between Rahman and opposition parties, United Tajik Opposition. Peaceful elections were held in 1999, though they were criticized by opposition parties and foreign observers. Rahman was re-elected with 98% of the vote. Elections were held again in 2006, with Rahman winning a third term in office with 79% of the vote in a field of 5 candidates. Several opposition parties boycotted the election and the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe was critical of it, although observers from the Commonwealth of Independent States claimed the elections to be legal and transparent. Rahman's government came under criticism from the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, OSCE, in October 2010 for its censorship and repression of the media. The OSCE claimed that the Tajik government censored Tajik and foreign websites and instituted tax inspections on independent printing houses that led to the cessation of printing activities for a number of independent newspapers. Russian border troops were stationed along the Tajik-Afghan border until summer 2005. Since the September 11, 2001 attacks, French troops have been stationed at the Dushanbe airport in support of air operations of NATO's International Security Assistance Force in Afghanistan. United States Army and Marine Corps personnel periodically visit Tajikistan to conduct joint training missions of up to several weeks' duration. The Government of India rebuilt the Anai Air Base, a military airport located 15 kilometers southwest of Dushanbe, at a cost of $70 million, completing the repairs in September 2010. It is now the main base of the Tajikistan Air Force, which reportedly has no planes. There have been talks with Russia concerning use of the Anai facility, and Russia continues to maintain a large base on the outskirts of Dushanbe and operate at least one military hospital in the capital city. In 2010, there were concerns among Tajik officials that Islamic militarism in the east of the country was on the rise following the escape of 25 militants from a Tajik prison in August, an ambush that killed 28 Tajik soldiers in the Rasht Valley in September, and another ambush in the valley in October that killed 30 soldiers, followed by fighting outside armed that left 3 militants dead. To date, the country's Interior Ministry asserts that the central government maintains full control over the country's east, and the military operation in the Rasht Valley was concluded in November 2010. However, fighting erupted again in July 2012.
Politics.
Almost immediately after independence, Tajikistan was plunged into a civil war that saw various factions, allegedly backed by Russia and Iran, fighting one another. All but 25,000 of the more than 400,000 ethnic Russians, who were mostly employed in industry, fled to Russia. By 1997, the war had cooled down, and a central government began to take form, with peaceful elections in 1999. Longtime observers of Tajikistan often characterize the country as profoundly averse to risk and skeptical of promises of reform, a political passivity they trace to the country's ruinous civil war. Elan Greenberg wrote in a news article in the New York Times just before the country's November 2006 presidential election. Tajikistan is officially a republic, and holds elections for the presidency and parliament. It is, however, a one-party dominant system, where the People's Democratic Party of Tajikistan routinely has a vast majority in parliament. Emomali Rahman has held the office of president continually since November 1994. The parliamentary elections in 2005 aroused many accusations from opposition parties and international observers that President Emomali Rahman corruptly manipulates the election process. The most recent elections, in February 2010, saw the ruling PDPT lose 4 seats in parliament, yet still maintain a comfortable majority. Organisation for Security and Cooperation in Europe election observers said the 2010 polling failed to meet many key OSCE commitments, and that these elections failed on many basic democratic standards. The government insisted that only minor violations had occurred, which would not affect the will of the Tajik people. Freedom of the press is ostensibly officially guaranteed by the government, but independent press outlets remain restricted, as does a substantial amount of web content. According to the Institute for War and Peace Reporting, access is blocked to local and foreign websites including Avesta TJ, chnews.com, Fergana.ru, Centrasia.ru, and journalists are often obstructed from reporting on controversial events. In practice, no public criticism of the regime is tolerated and all direct protest is severely suppressed and does not receive coverage in the local media. The presidential election held on November 6, 2006 was boycotted by mainline opposition parties, including the 23,000-member Islamic Renaissance Party. 4 remaining opponents all but endorsed the incumbent, Rahman. Tajikistan gave Iran its support in Iran's membership bid to join the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, after a meeting between the Tajik president and the Iranian foreign minister.
And administrative divisions.
Tajikistan consists of 4 administrative divisions. These are the provinces, Vilayat, of Sughd and Katlan, the autonomous province of Gorno-Badakhshan, abbreviated as GBAO, and the region of Republican Subordination, RRP, Rayuni Respublikanskego Podchiniya in transliteration from Russian or NTJ, Nokhayakhoitabai in Tajik. Formerly known as Karategin Province. Each region is divided into several districts, Tajik, Nokhaya, Nohir or Rayan, which in turn are subdivided into Jamaats, village-level self-governing units, and then villages, qishloks. As of 2006, there were 58 districts and 367 Jamaats in Tajikistan.
Geography.
Tajikistan is landlocked, and is the smallest nation in Central Asia by area. It lies mostly between latitudes 36° and 41° N, a small area is north of 41°, and longitudes 67° and 75° E, a small area is east of 75°. It is covered by mountains of the Pamir Range, and more than 50% of the country is over 3,000 meters, 9,800 feet, above sea level. The only major areas of lower land are in the north, part of the Fergana Valley, and in the southern Kofanihon and Vorksh River valleys, which form the Darya. Dushanbe is located on the southern slopes above the Kofanihon Valley. The Darya and Panj rivers mark the border with Afghanistan, and the glaciers in Tajikistan's mountains are the major source of runoff for the Aral Sea. There are over 900 rivers in Tajikistan longer than 10 kilometers.
Lakes.
About 2% of the country's area is covered by lakes, the best known of which are the following. Kyrgyzstan Reservoir, Sughd, Iskandakul, Fan Mountains, Kulikalan, Kulikalan, Fan Mountains, Nuke Reservoir, Katlan, Karakul, Tajik, Karakul. Eastern Pamir, Saris, Pamir, Shade Lake, Pamir, Zorkul, Pamir.
Economy.
Tajikistan was the poorest republic of the Soviet Union and is the poorest country in Central Asia as well as in the former Soviet Union today. The current economic situation remains fragile, largely owing to corruption, uneven economic reforms, and economic mismanagement. With foreign revenue precariously dependent upon remittances from migrant workers overseas and exports of aluminium and cotton, the economy is highly vulnerable to external shocks. In FY 2000, international assistance remained an essential source of support for rehabilitation programs that reintegrated former Civil War combatants into the civilian economy, thus helping keep the peace. International assistance also was necessary to address the second year of severe drought that resulted in a continued shortfall of food production. In 2006, GDP per capita of Tajikistan was 85% of 1990's level, while the population has increased from 5.3 million in 1991 to 7.3 million in 2009. On August 21, 2001, the Red Cross announced that a famine was striking Tajikistan, and called for international aid for Tajikistan and Uzbekistan. Tajikistan's economy grew substantially after the war. The GDP of Tajikistan expanded at an average rate of 9.6% over the period of 2000 to 2007 according to the World Bank data. This improved Tajikistan's position among other Central Asian countries, namely Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan, which seem to have degraded economically ever since. Tajikistan is an active member of the Economic Cooperation Organization, ECO. In 2007 the Anzib Tunnel was completed, connecting the previously hard-to-access northern part of the country to the capital Dushanbe has been labeled as part of the New Silk Road. It is part of a road under construction that will connect Tajikistan to Iran in the Persian Gulf through Afghanistan. In 2004 a bridge between Afghanistan and Tajikistan was built, improving the country's access to South Asia. The bridge was built by the United States. The primary sources of income in Tajikistan are aluminium production, cotton growing and remittances from migrant workers. Cotton accounts for 60% of agricultural output, supporting 75% of the rural population, and using 45% of irrigated arable land. The aluminium industry is represented by the state-owned Tajik Aluminum Company, the biggest aluminium plant in Central Asia and one of the biggest in the world. Tajikistan's rivers, such as the Wakhan and the Panj, have great hydropower potential, and the government has focused on attracting investment for projects for internal use and electricity exports. Tajikistan is home to the Nurk, the highest dam in the world. Lately, Russia's RAOUES energy giant has been working on the Sanchuda 1 hydroelectric power station, 670 MW capacity, commenced operations on January 18, 2008. Other projects at the development stage include Sanchuda 2 by Iran, Attribution by the Chinese company Sino Hydro, and the Rogan power plant that, at a projected height of 335 meters, 1,099 feet, would supersede the Nurk Dam as highest in the world if it is brought to completion. CASA 1000 project will transmit 1,000 MW of surplus electricity from Tajikistan to Pakistan with power transit through Afghanistan. The total length of transmission line is 750 kilometers, while the project is planned to be on public-private partnership basis with the support of WB, IFC, ADB and IDB. The project cost is estimated to be around $865 million. Other energy resources include sizable coal deposits and smaller reserves of natural gas and petroleum. Foreign remittance flows from Tajik migrant workers abroad, mainly in Russia, has become by far the main source of income for millions of Tajikistan's people and represents additional 36.2% of country's GDP, directly reaching the poverty-stricken population. According to some estimates, about 20% of the population lives on less than $1.25 per day. Migration from Tajikistan and the consequent remittances have been unprecedented in their magnitude and economic impact. Tajikistan has achieved transition from a plan to a market economy without substantial and protracted recourse to aid, of which it by now receives only negligible amounts, and by purely market-based means, simply by exporting its main commodity of comparative advantage, cheap labor. The World Bank Tajikistan Policy Note 2006 concludes that remittances have played an important role as one of the drivers of Tajikistan's robust economic growth during the past several years, have increased incomes, and as a result helped significantly reduce poverty. Drug trafficking is the major illegal source of income in Tajikistan, as it is an important transit country for Afghan narcotics bound for Russian and, to a lesser extent, Western European markets. Some opium poppy is also raised locally for the domestic market. However, with the increasing assistance from international organizations, such as UNODC, and cooperation with the US, Russian, EU and Afghan authorities, a level of progress on the fight against illegal drug trafficking is being achieved. Tajikistan holds third place in the world for heroin and raw opium confiscations, 1,216.3 kilograms of heroin and 267.8 kilograms of raw opium in the first half of 2006. Drug money corrupts the country's government. According to some experts, the well-known personalities that fought on both sides of the civil war and have held the positions in the government after the armistice was signed are now involved in the drug trade. UNODC is working with Tajikistan to strengthen border crossings, provide training, and set up joint interdiction teams. It also helped to establish Tajikistani Drug Control Agency. Since the collapse of the USSR, there has been a significant and growing trend of Tajiks migrating abroad for jobs and seeking refuge. In 2010, remittances from Tajik labor migrants totaled an estimated $2.1 billion, an increase from 2009.
Demographics.
Tajikistan has a population of 7,349,145. July 2009 is Tajiks who speak the Tajik language. A variety of Persian, are the main ethnic group, although there is a sizable minority of Uzbeks and Russians, whose numbers are declining due to emigration. In 1989, ethnic Russians in Tajikistan made up 7.6% of the population, but they are now less than 0.5%, after civil war spurred Russian emigration. The Paymaris of Badakhshan are considered to belong to the larger group of Tajiks. All citizens of Tajikistan are called Tajiks. The official and vernacular language of Tajikistan is Tajik, although Russian is routinely used in business and communication. The constitution mentioned it as the language for interethnic communication, but an amendment passed in 2009 removed all official roles of Russian. Despite its poverty, Tajikistan has a high rate of literacy due to the old Soviet system of free education, with an estimated 99.5% of the population having the ability to read and write. The majority of the population follows Sunni Islam. There is also a sizable minority of Ismailis. Bukharan Jews had lived in Tajikistan since the 2nd century BC, but today almost none are left. There is also a small population of Yanobai people who have lived in the mountainous district of Sughd Vilayat for many centuries. The German population in Tajikistan was 38,853 in 1979, but the German community has almost vanished through emigration to Germany since the Soviet collapse. Nearly 1 million Tajik men worked abroad, mainly in Russia, in 2009. More than 70% of the female population lives in traditional villages.
Health.
Despite repeated efforts by the Tajik government to improve and expand healthcare, the system remains extremely underdeveloped and poor, with severe shortages of medical supplies. The state's Ministry of Labour and Social Welfare reported that 104,272 disabled people are registered in Tajikistan, 2000. This group of people suffers most from poverty in Tajikistan. The government of Tajikistan and the World Bank considered activities to support this part of the population described in the World Bank's Poverty Reduction Strategy paper. Public expenditure on health was at 1% of the GDP in 2004. Life expectancy at birth is estimated to be 66.38 years in 2012. The infant mortality rate is approximately 37 deaths per 1,000 children in 2012. In the early 2000s, there were 203 physicians per 100,000 people. Tajikistan is the only country in the world where polio is on the rise. From 0 cases in 2008 and 2009, 458 confirmed cases have been reported for 2010, of 976 cases worldwide.
Culture.
Historically, Tajiks and Persians come from very similar stock, speaking variants of the same language and are related as part of the larger group of Iranian peoples. The Tajik language is the mother tongue of around 80% of the citizens of Tajikistan. The main urban centers in today's Tajikistan include Dushanbe, the capital, Kyrgyzstan, Kulab, Panjshir and Attribution. There are also Uzbek, Kyrgyz and Russian minorities. The Payamari people of Gorno-Badakhshan Autonomous Province in the southeast, bordering Afghanistan and China, though considered part of the Tajik ethnicity, nevertheless are distinct linguistically and culturally from most Tajiks. In contrast to the mostly Sunni Muslim residents of the rest of Tajikistan, the Paymaris overwhelmingly follow the Ismaili sect of Islam, and speak a number of Eastern Iranian languages, including Shnai, Roshani, Kufi and Wakhi. Isolated in the highest parts of the Pamir Mountains, they have preserved many ancient cultural traditions and folk arts that have been largely lost elsewhere in the country. The Yanobai people live in mountainous areas of northern Tajikistan. The estimated number of Yanobis is now about 25,000. Forced migrations in the 20th century decimated their numbers. They speak the Yanobai language, which is the only direct modern descendant of the ancient Sogdian language. Tajikistan artisans created the Dushanbe Tea House, which was presented in 1988 as a gift to the sister city of Boulder, Colorado. In 2010, a Tajik citizen Niloufer Sherzad became Miss United Nations, representing Tajik culture.
Education.
The 2002 to 2005 public spending on education was 3.5% of the GDP, although it was 3.9% in 2011 according to a UNICEF-supported survey. About 25% of girls in Tajikistan fail to complete compulsory primary education because of poverty and gender bias, although literacy is generally high in Tajikistan.
Sport.
Tajikistan's mountains provide many opportunities for outdoor sports, such as hill climbing, mountain biking, rock climbing, skiing, snowboarding, hiking, and mountain climbing. The facilities are limited, however. Mountain climbing and hiking tours to the Fan and Famir Mountains, including the 7,000 peaks in the region, are seasonally organized by local and international alpine agencies. Football is the most popular sport in Tajikistan. The Tajikistan national football team competes in FIFA and AFC competitions. The top clubs in Tajikistan compete in the Tajik League. The Tajikistan Cricket Federation was formed in 2012 as the governing body for the sport of cricket in Tajikistan. It was granted affiliate membership of the Asian Cricket Council in the same year. Rugby union in Tajikistan is a minor but growing sport. 3 Tajikistani athletes have won Olympic medals for their country since independence. They are, wrestler Yusuf Abduzalimov, silver in Beijing 2008, judoka Razel Balkiev, bronze in Beijing 2008, and boxer Mavsana Koryeva, bronze in London 2012.
Religion.
Sunni Islam of the Hanafi school has been officially recognized by the government since 2009. Tajikistan considers itself a secular state with a constitution providing for freedom of religion. The government has declared 2 Islamic holidays, Eid al-Fitr and Eid-e-Kurban, as state holidays. According to a U.S. State Department release and Pew Research Group, the population of Tajikistan is 98% Muslim. Approximately 87%-95% of them are Sunni and roughly 3% are Shia and roughly 7% are non-denominational Muslims. The remaining 2% of the population are followers of Russian Orthodoxy, a variety of Protestant denominations, Catholicism, Zoroastrianism and Buddhism. A great majority of Muslims fast during Ramadan, although only about 1/3 in the countryside and 10% in the cities observe daily prayer and dietary restrictions. Relationships between religious groups are generally amicable, although there is some concern among mainstream Muslim leaders that minority religious groups undermine national unity. There is a concern for religious institutions becoming active in the political sphere. The Islamic Renaissance Party, IRP, a major combatant in the 1992–1997 civil war and then proponent of the creation of an Islamic state in Tajikistan, constitutes no more than 30% of the government by statute. Membership in Hizb ut-Tahrir, a party which today aims for a non-violent overthrow of secular governments and the unification of Tajiks under one Islamic state, is illegal and members are subject to arrest and imprisonment. Numbers of large mosques appropriate for Friday prayers are limited and some feel this is discriminatory. By law, religious communities must register by the State Committee on Religious Affairs, SCRA, and with local authorities. Registration with the SCRA requires a charter, a list of 10 or more members, and evidence of local government approval prayer site location. Religious groups who do not have a physical structure are not allowed to gather publicly for prayer. Failure to register can result in large fines and closure of place of worship. There are reports that registration on the local level is sometimes difficult to obtain.
Government. Chiefs of State and Cabinet Members of Government.
The President of Tajikistan is Emomali Rahman, and the Prime Minister is Kokhir Rasulzada. The first Deputy Prime Minister is Matlab Davletov. The 2 Deputy Prime Ministers are Muradali Alamadan and Rukia Kurbanova.
Transport.